Um, I first would like to thank everyone who has worked so tirelessly for this event. Carol, thank you, Carol, and all of the people who worked with Carol, thank you so very much. VFW, thank you for having this building available to us. And I want to thank my friends who have come to speak here today. Shauna Cox, Morgan Philpott, Debbie B., and Mark Herr with Center for Self-Governance. Thank you so much for coming and taking time to help share this message with all of you. And thank you to Geneva and to Janessa and to Garrett for coming and performing that beautiful music. Thank you to David Bray, who's going to continue to perform for us today. And thank you to all of you who continue to support all of us, in particularly my family and my children. Thank you. Thank you for coming to learn more about LaVoy from my perspective. That is one of the reasons why I did partner with Center for Self-Governance in putting together this documentary series, is because I knew he would do it with truth. With truth. And that LaVoy would be represented in the light in which he was, and not some conjured up label that he had attached to him throughout the whole incident at Malheur. And there were many of those labels, weren't there? And I hope that you will continue to stay, of course, and see part 2 and part 3, and then stay tuned for part 4. Like Mark said, it is in the rough edit. And it is amazing. And it's been done so well by Jeremiah. I'm so pleased to have met that young man. What amazing talent we have, and a bunch of young people. Amazing. And Jeremiah's youngest sister, who's about 18, wrote all the score, the musical score to each one of the documentary's parts. And so it's amazing talent in this particular family as well, the Lopez family. But again, thank you. Thank you for coming. How many of you, well, first off, how many of you have seen episode 1 before? Quite a bit of you, okay. And so now that all of you have seen it, what did you think? It's been amazingly done, hasn't it? And I'm really pleased with it. There's only been a couple of things that I tried. I thought being this close to the producer and the filmmaker that I could have some influence. No. I said, can't you use a little bit better lighting? Anyways, but that's kind of a standing joke between me and Mark. But I'm really pleased. I'm really, really pleased. I often tell the story about how I met LaVoy, because it is a joyful memory. And I know that a lot of you have heard it already, but there were quite a few hands that didn't go up. And so I'd like to talk about how I first met LaVoy. It was, I know I love this story too. I love it because it brings back good memories and a happy time. It was back in 1992, and LaVoy and I had just come out of a divorce, and we were attending a singles dance at our church. And it was back in the day when line dancing was in. I don't know if you guys remember line dancing. Okay, 92. And I liked line dancing. It was a lot of fun, and I didn't need a partner. So that was even better, right? You could be dancing all night, and you didn't even have to have a partner. And that was my goal, to dance all night. And I can remember being out on the floor, and this gorgeous cowboy walked into the room, and I can remember him walking along the side of the wall, and then in front of us, and he sat up on the stage, and he just sat there watching all of us dance. And I thought to myself, boy, I want to dance with him. And one of the ladies must have got tired of dancing by herself, because then she organized the barn dance, and she put us all in a great big circle, and then put a young man in front of each one of us. And as the bell rang, the young man shifted to the right, and so he was able to dance with each one of the girls. And guess who was right in front of me, right in front of the lady on my right? It was LaVoy. So I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, she's never going to be able to make it all the way around back to me before this song ends. And I'm going, that's not fair. But God had something else in mind, because he ended up standing right in front of me when the song ended. We didn't get to dance. And so I think he took pity on me, because he then asked me to dance. And it was a slow dance, and it was really sweet. And I didn't want him to get away, so then I got brave and I said, hey, you want to dance? But it was a fast dance. And he looked at me and he says, I don't do fast dances. And I said, oh, come on, you're just being chicken. And he said, no, really, you don't want me to dance this dance with you. He says, I don't have any rhythm. And he says, but I'll tell you what, if you can tell me how many kids I have, I'll dance this next dance with you. I'm going, I don't even know your name. How am I going to guess how many kids you have? Oh my goodness. But again, God had something else in mind, because I said 6. And he looked at me and he said, that's right. And I went, oh my gosh, you have 6 kids? And I'm going, oh my heck, you are definitely the package deal. But he was a man of his word, so he had to dance that dance. And it was so funny, because it was like, he was like Urkel with no rhythm whatsoever. Oh my gosh. And we laughed and we laughed. And he then asked me if I'd go back to the stage and sit down and talk with him for a while. And so I did, until some other young man asked me to dance. And I was off. And it was the end of the night, and I thought, oh dang, that cowboy never asked me to dance again. But as we were picking up all the chairs and putting them away and cleaning up the gym, he came up to me and he says, Jeanette, he says, would you give me a ride to my truck? I got a flat tire. I said, you got a flat tire? And I wasn't quite sure if that was just a line, make up yarn. I was going, And, but sure enough, he did have a flat tire. And, well, to make a long story short, 2 weeks later we were married. So it was a very short engagement. But we were very happy. He did have 6 kids, and I had 3. And we had together 1, Tian, who you met in the film. Our little ramrod, our little cowgirl. And she is now grown and married and running the family ranch, because I can't be there all the time. Quite an amazing young woman. And then we had 2 young men that we adopted through the therapeutic foster care that we did for 18 years of teenage boys. And so we have a total of 12 children. And as of the 29th of December, I have 31 grandchildren. And 1 more on the way. Ari is due the end of March, so it'll be a total of 32 grandchildren. Isn't that amazing? And I think I look back and back in 2015, when he was doing those videos, home videos, LaVoy, he mentioned that he was a grandpa of 20, so that's how many grandchildren have been born since he's left. Anyways, we are truly blessed. We are truly, truly blessed. And most of you know that I found and met someone. His name is Stephen Skinner, and I'm truly very, very happy. I'm truly blessed to have such a wonderful man in my life. And we were married on the 29th of December this year. So, yeah, thank you. And he's here this time. He's probably not happy I said that. But he's finding out what he's getting himself into. Anyways, some of the reasons that our family was so excited about doing a documentary with Mark was, I mentioned before, is that we were excited about the truth that would come out, because we have watched over the last 3 years different documentaries that have been put out with very little actual substance to them, very little truth, a lot of supposition, a lot of innuendo, a lot of labeling. And so I was just really grateful for Mark and his organization to put together this. Our family's mission in this documentary is a little different than Mark's, but that's okay. We all have different reasons why we do something, right? And ours was because we wanted the truth to come out, but more importantly, we wanted accountability. We wanted justice. We feel that LaVoy was robbed of his due process. So we want justice, accountability, and we wanted reform. You know, as we go through this process of the wrongful death lawsuit of over we have 12 plus defendants named in our complaint. We want reform because we see this as a bigger problem than just, my husband being murdered without his due process. There is a bigger problem. The regulations need to be looked at, the Patriot Act needs to be looked at, the definitions, the labeling in the Patriot Act need to be looked at. We need to have reform training for our police officers so that they don't see us as the enemy, the American citizen as the enemy. We need reform. So we're hoping that as we go through that process of the wrongful death, that in the end when we win, because I believe that we will, because we have an excellent case against the FBI and an excellent case against Oregon State Police. There's so much, There's so much that the average American citizen does not know about this story and does not understand about this story. And sitting in the courtroom for most of the trial in Oregon and part of the trial in Nevada, and then sitting through Astorita's trial of 4 weeks, I learned so much, and so much evidence was coming out in those trials that the average public, average American, we don't get to hear because the press isn't bringing it to us, right? Unless you are actually there, you have no idea what is going on, and then you have the article to read, and that's all you're basing your opinion on. So it's so important that we're personally involved, that we go and we find out for ourselves, right? Sitting in that courtroom, I learned the FBI trial. Okay, Astorita was indicted for 5 counts by the grand jury, 3 counts for lying and 2 for obstruction of justice. And when we sat there for those 4 weeks, it was an amazing thing, because I remember on the first day, the judge didn't let anybody in. He had the public sitting out in the foyer, in the hallway, and we waited and we waited and we waited. And I remember I'm sitting next to Maxine with the Oregonian, and she says, "This is odd. This is really odd. I should be in there. We all should be in there." And it's 4:30. And we're sitting there going, what's going on? They can't be interviewing the jurors without the public present. And she's looking at her watch. She says, "I'm going to call the judge." She's brave. And she did. And she called the judge, and he actually picked up. And when he realized that she wasn't out there, he let her in, but she was only in there for like 15 minutes, and the process was over. And he refused to allow any of the public to go in. But she had to remind him of her right to be in there, right? But he still didn't allow the public in. And so we knew that we were up against a brick wall. They had the jurors questioned and picked. And the next morning, they seated the jurors, and then the judge went on to give the instructions or opening remarks. And I'll never forget those opening remarks, because those opening remarks, he begins by talking about LaVoy Finicum, how he was considered armed and dangerous. And he goes on and on and on about a justified killing. And then he finishes by saying, "But this trial is not about LaVoy Finicum. This trial is about Agent Astorita. So you need to not think about LaVoy Finicum." And I'm thinking to myself, well, then why talk about him? If this trial is not about him, why did you bring him up and put that seed in the minds of the jurors? Why talk about that? We all know why. Well, the trial went on, and it continued, and some of the evidence that came out was very eye-opening. I'd never heard before, and it was testified to by an FBI agent supervisor that was at the first stop. He testified to the fact that he was giving commands to the people in my husband's vehicle, and that my husband and Ryan Payne and the others were in compliance. In compliance, people. Did we hear that in the press? In compliance to the orders that were being given to them, until, he testified to, an Oregon State officer fired a round at the vehicle, escalating the entire situation, which he also testified to, that it escalated at that point. He said, "What the F did you just do?" to the officer that had just fired a round. "Do you realize you just escalated this whole situation?" That's when you saw the men pull their hands back in, and things kind of escalated at that point. Shauna did it not. And her camera is then turned on, and then you get to hear what's going on inside the vehicle. And you hear them make a decision to go to the neighboring county where there is a sheriff who is one that they trust, and that they have this trust in, and that they want to go to for safety. You hear my husband say, "We're going to go see this sheriff. You can arrest me there. Follow me and you can arrest me there." He was not fleeing law enforcement when he left that first stop. He left to go to law enforcement whom he trusted. That's what he was doing, because you see, they had already lost trust in the people that were handling the operation. When they were in compliance, they were fired upon for no reason. So they were fleeing, they were headed to law enforcement and John Day, who was waiting for them in that meeting for safety. "You can arrest me there," right? It was also testified to at that point that officer number 2, who had fired that round into the vehicle, radioed ahead to officer number 1 that was waiting at the kill stop about a mile ahead. And he says, "We're going to have to kill Finicum." Why? Why would an officer radio ahead to another officer stating that they're going to have to kill Finicum at that point? What did he do? Was there a warrant for his arrest? No. Had he broken any laws? No. And you will hear in part 2 how they admit to them not breaking any laws, that there were no state laws broken, that there were no federal laws that they knew of that they had broken, that Washington was trying to come up with some. You're going to hear it. Undercover audio. They had done nothing wrong. He had done nothing wrong. My husband, like he says, never even received a speeding ticket, never did anything outside of the law. He was very law-abiding. And to be able to go up and stand for your rights is a right we have under the Constitution, be it free speech, right? Free speech. So as he is pulling forward and he goes around the blind curve, officer number 1, who received the radio call, then fires into my husband's truck 3 times. My husband then pulls to the left into the snowbank, where you watch the video, Shauna's video, and he immediately exits the truck with his hands in the air, and at the same time 2 shots are fired by Agent Astorita when his hands were empty and in the air. What did he do? What had he done? No due process. Then you watch, and this was astounding to me, because when I didn't realize until you're sitting in that courtroom and you're watching the overplaying videos, and you're listening to Shauna's video, and you're listening to the testimonies from all the agents and the officers, and you realize it's kind of unfolding before your eyes, and you realize that officer number 2 radioed ahead to officer number 1 to kill him, and he was so hell-bent in participating that he was able to get in his car and drive all and be one to put a bullet in my husband's back before Officer 1 fired the other 2 shots into my husband's back. That's murder, people. No American citizen deserves that. We deserve our right to due process. We deserve our right to a trial. We deserve to have charges. We deserve to be served with a warrant. We deserve that process, do we not? We are innocent until proven guilty in this country. But in the media, they were found guilty before anybody heard what it was about. And another thing, when I was up there for Astorita's trial, that was the same time that they took over the ICE building. And they took it over for 42 something days. And I'm sitting there watching this unfold while I'm sitting in the courtroom listening to what they did to some really good people and how they murdered my husband for standing up for their belief system. And then watching over here in the media, them destroying property and hurting others, and nothing happening. No governor standing up saying, hey, we've got to get this taken care of, Loretta Lynch. Please do something. Send your forces from DC. Take these people down. I want this taken care of. When you read the emails going back and forth of how they want this stopped, they want the message of freedom, property rights, land rights. They want it squashed. They don't want it. Because why? Because those men were traveling to groups of people talking about this, and it was resonating in the hearts and minds of you. And the crowds were growing, and people wanted to know more. And they couldn't have that. What did Senator Wyden say in a Coin 6 News interview? The virus was spreading. What was the virus? Freedom. The message was liberty and freedom. They had to silence. They had to have it turn out the way. I believe had he not gotten out of that car, they would have killed everybody in. And had they not hunkered down when they were being, bullets were flying at that truck afterwards, they would all have been killed. They were expecting maybe some kind of a shootout of some kind, but nobody drew a weapon. So after they have murdered my husband, they leave him laying in the snow, bleeding out. They open fire on Shauna and their group inside my husband's truck. And it's testified to that the first person to reach my husband's body is an FBI medic who tests him to see if he's alive, and of course he is not at this time. And he also testifies to in court that there's no weapon on him. He sees no weapon on his body. Now I ask you, when you open up somebody and you're putting those things on them to test their heart beat, if there's a gun in my husband's pocket, you're going to see it. Okay? Just keep that in your mind. As the trial continues, you get to hear all the officers testifying to how they considered him to be armed and dangerous. Armed and dangerous over and over and over again. Were you afraid? Were you afraid? And I'm thinking to myself, my gosh, you guys. Then it's testified to by the medical examiner that she doesn't arrive on the scene for 9 hours. And when she arrived, 9 hours later, she finds the scene unsecured. Unsecured. For 9 hours, those 2 planes are continuing to film above at different altitudes. And we're getting to watch as they go into the reasons why Astorita is being charged, right? For firing those shots, and they have expert witnesses that come in and they talk about the trajectory, and there's cones, and the only person they pin within that cone is Astorita. That's why the grand jury indicted him. And so we're watching all of this evidence unfold. And we're also watching that during that 9 hours of the scene being unsecured, you're watching all these agents roaming around the scene, going from the body to the truck to the body, putting things in the truck, taking things out of the truck, searching with their guns, the flashlights on the end of their guns, the ground, bending down, picking things up, looking under the trucks, picking things up, moving around the scene for 9 hours, purposely destroying evidence, messing with evidence. There was a 40-year veteran FBI trainer who testified that there were so many protocols that had been broken during this case. He testified to that. They had evidence that it was Asterita based on their expert witnesses. But then, let me just back up a little bit. We call in the elite team from DC, right? The elite team of the FBI, the HRT team. They're supposed to be highly trained. The best of the best, right? Well, Asterita testifies to the fact that he cannot remember shooting his weapon that day. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I don't shoot my weapon very often. Very, very little do I go out shooting, if ever. I haven't been since LaVoy. Anyways, so you're thinking to yourself, I remember every single time I pulled a trigger. I imagine all of you do too, right? Are we the elite of the elite? Have we been highly trained? Are we the experts that just came from DC? And here he is sitting on the stand and testifying to the fact that he cannot remember shooting his gun. And what makes it even more disgusting is that his fellow teammates then get up and testify to the same thing. That it could have been them. They don't know. They don't remember. So what happened to the jurors? What just happened with that testimony? Reasonable doubt, exactly. Reasonable doubt. And the jurors after they rendered their verdict of not guilty, were interviewed. And they were interviewed saying that they didn't know, they knew someone was lying, but they just didn't know who, right? Because it was the good old boy system. Let's protect this man, because after all, we've spent a lot of money on him and trained him, and he's above reproach. And so they rendered a not guilty verdict. Well, the FBI has since, I believe it was in October, issued a statement in the press that they were going to do an independent investigation into the lack of candor during that trial. And I was encouraged until my lawyer explained to me, well, that's good that they're doing that. But Jeanette, they don't have to tell us what they find. You may never know what happens. They may never do anything. And that, to me, then it was just like, why bother releasing a statement, right, if you're not going to do anything? So when I say our family wants reform, we want reform. There's corruption within these agencies and within the FBI, within our police departments. We need reform. We need to be able to trust the men and women that go into these types of jobs. We need to have that faith in them, because after all, they're there to serve and protect. And if we can't believe them, if they're going to be liars, if they're going to obstruct justice and take evidence from a scene, if they're going to plant a gun on someone so that they don't have to take responsibility for how their mission got out of control because it didn't go the way they had hoped, we can't, as an American people, we can't allow that to be. So we're hoping that when we win this wrongful death suit, that with the moral authority of that win, we can move forward and work through Congress for reform. I've talked a little bit about the press, and I know there's press here, and thank you for coming. Thank you for being willing to tell the story and to watch the video, the documentary, so that you can see and hear the truth too. And I ask you to be responsible in your reporting and to continue with that truth. And I thank you for that ahead of time. I know that as we've traveled, we've had quite a few experiences with being lambasted in the press the night before an event, with complete inaccurate information. Wikipedia is their source, people. I'm thinking, whoa, that's not very much investigative reporting at all. Our family personally has tried to get that changed on Wikipedia because there's so many inaccuracies, so much false statements there, and trial evidence that proves that we're right, and they refuse to allow even family members to put correct information on there. So please, don't use Wikipedia as your source. Don't. It's inaccurate. It was an experience to sit there during that trial. I was grateful for that. I was grateful for the opportunity to sit there with friends that supported me, Mark and my attorney, and Margot and Carol and Lee and all of you that came day in and day out to sit there and support. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for all of you who continue to support our family, support truth and justice, and to support this country, because that's what we're standing for. We're standing for this country. My husband was a God-fearing man. He was a family man, and you'll hear himself describe what his title is. Take note of that. Because that's what mattered more to him than anything. I'm hoping for that due process for him now as we go through this wrongful death. And thank you for your continued support in financing that. I appreciate that. My daughter Tara has worked tirelessly for about a year. It's been a labor of love. She was just keeping a diary really for her sanity after her dad was murdered, and she just has kept note of everything that was happening to us because everything was just so quick. It's like rolling down a mountain of snow, and it just kept picking up momentum, and so quick and so fast. And she was journaling everything for cathartic reasons, therapeutic. And about a year ago, she decided to put it in a book, and she did. And so it has been released today for pre-orders. She's got 100 hardback copies that are on pre-order. They are selling for $100 a piece, and every single bit of that goes to the legal fund. The soft copies will follow at about $20 a piece, so look for that announcement too. But I'm really pleased and proud of my children that have taken up this stand for truth, for this country, for what this country stands for the American way. I'm grateful for them. They're amazing individuals. And so I imagine that each one of them in their own way is doing something, but as I read off to you how many grandkids I had, this will put it in perspective for you. Okay, I have 8 daughters and 4 sons, and all of them are having kids except for 3 because they're not quite yet having kids. They're just married. And so I was counting up how many of them are over the age of 6. I have 5 over the age of 6 of the 32. Isn't that crazy? So it's like there were 6 of them pregnant continuously since that have given us so many, but they're such precious little spirits. Oh my goodness, they're so cute.
How many dances for that?
How many dances for that? Yeah, no kidding, I should get quite a few dances for that. You'll have to pay up when I get there. Anyways, thank you again for coming, and I don't know where we are with time, but I'll give you 5 minutes if anybody has a question that you're interested in asking real quickly. But again, I do have the sign up for Tara's book if anybody wants it down at my desk. Yes, sir.
When will these documentaries be released for sale to the public?
That's a good question. Well, we are currently traveling anywhere anyone invites us for episodes 1, 2, and 3. 4 is in the rough cut, and as soon as 4 is done, we'll start to do something via what's it called, Mark? Internet? Webinar. Well, see, I'm not technical. But we'll start doing webinars, and then we'll probably get the sets produced and available for sale on my website and Mark's website. A year, maybe? I don't know. Yes, sorry.
All of us, when you are going to be on cable so that we can share what we want to do, that you hear what we have to share, fully hear.
Okay, and that would be Tuesday, correct? And do you have a time frame for that?
Yes, it's the Jeff Political Coffee. It airs in the morning and then again in the
At 6 o'clock in the morning?
it airs
6
from
a.m.
6 to 7, and then from, I believe, 5 to 6.
So 6 to 7 in the morning, Jeff, the coffee hour, and then 5 to 6 in the evening on Tuesday. So look for that, because Mark and I are on that show. Yes?
The day of the signing ceremony at Maui, after that, the boy was beaming that day. Did he believe that he was getting traction and making headway in that avenue? Or, I mean, what was his thoughts or your discussion possibly after that signing?
I remember very well his conversation with me that day. He was really, really excited for the progress that had been made. And I remember there was so much press. There was probably like 30 press members there, just all huddled underneath this little pavilion. And I'm out there with the press. I'm standing in the audience while they're up front. And he left standing up front and came and stood by me, and he put his arm around me, and I says, "Don't you want to be up there?" And he says, "No, this is right where I want to be." And I'm just, and he had some things to say to me then, and he was glad that I was there supporting him. He was glad his wife was there. And I remember after all of that, there was some professional hecklers that showed up. And that one young lady had a mouth like a truck driver. Sorry if any of you are truck drivers that don't speak like that. But let me tell you, that girl was like, oh my goodness. And she was in that gentleman's face, just using the F word repetitively, and he was trying to keep his composure, and I remember it elevating, and LaVoy and I were standing over there, and I remember taking him by the arm and just watching this, and then big old Tom came up to LaVoy, the rancher, and he says, "That's it. That's it. Where's the paper? Where can I sign? I'm done. We have to start standing." And I remember that's when we took Tom and his son and we went into the office, and I remember it being filmed, and they interviewed Tom and his son for the reasons why they were then going to sign, to no longer sign the agreements with the BLM. But that's my memory of that day. It was a good day, and he was happy, and he was excited that they could see, progress moving forward. Yes, sir.
One question that came to my mind was this kind of hostility from BLM. This is when Obama was in power, and let's talk about this. If you get any help at all, okay, that was who I've been. When you mentioned realize that answer that.
Right, and I have to, when you mentioned Dan Love, we have to go back even before Obama, because Dan Love was a corrupt agent he was a corrupt law enforcement BLM agent, and he had been doing illegal activities for over a decade. He was involved in so many things that were, harming American citizens, ranchers, farmers, a doctor, a dentist, for Pete's sake, for the little Indian bead. He ended up committing suicide, Dr. Red. And after that, the informant who had informed and told lies about Dr. Red then committed suicide because he couldn't live with himself. So, but Dan Love was so hell-bent on getting his objective met. And that meant even at the expense of falsifying threat assessments, because that is where that came in. It was Dan Love who helped to falsify the threat assessment that had been done on the rights issue that you heard my husband talk about. But I think we're coming to a reasonable, because I'm not going to bend on that. My water is my water. I own the grass, I own the water, I have a deed, I paid for it. I bought it from a private citizen, not the government. I bought it from a private citizen. It's property. And therefore, I'm not willing to bend on that. So, but it's turning out good. Yes, sir.
Do you have any updates on the Bundy or the Hammond ranches?
And the Hammonds were pardoned, and I believe they've just kind of gone back to ranching and very quiet. They just want to live a quiet life. The Bundys also have gone back to ranching. I hear that they're going to try to take the Bundys back to court. That came out in the paper a couple days ago. So I'm not sure where that will lead. I haven't had a chance to talk to them in the last couple of days. But and my wrongful death, the government shutdown has put everything on hold. So it's postponed until further notice, all civil cases. Yes, sir?
Jeanette, I very much think you got a heart of gold, my dear. God bless you for starting. The second thing is because of the Bundy situation case that was tossed out because of the discovery decisions that there was home evidence on the Bundys and any other participants, is there any parts of that case that your attorney might be able to look back through because it might be prejudicial to your wrongful death?
I'm sure that I know that we're going to look at all the evidence available to us from the Oregon trial, the Nevada trial, the Astorita trial, and then we will ask for all discovery in reference to the kill stop murder. So, because that's all separate. That part where my husband was involved in that roadblock has not been used in any of the other trials. So we have to ask for all that discovery. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here, and God bless.